there, everyone. In this video, we're going to be doing a brief overview and introduction to some of the ideas in Riggle's article about the ethics of awesomeness, as he puts it. So in the video, we're just going to introduce an awesome and a sucky example at the very beginning, and this will lead into this idea that Riggle has of appealing to awesomeness as a kind of contemporary ideal. And then we'll look at an initial objection he brings up to appealing to awesomeness in this way. And then that'll lead into, Riggle's proposed analysis of what it actually means to be an awesome person. And then we'll end with some examples and some discussion of some related concepts and some questions we might have and consider as we try to spell out this idea he's proposing. Riggle's article begins with an example of Jeremy Fry. He links to a YouTube video where you can see all this play out. So this happens during a 2009 Celtics game where during halftime, a Bon Jovi song called Living on a Prayer is played in the stadium. And the Jumbotron's going around and looking at different people in the stadium until eventually it points at Jeremy. Now, everybody else had been smiling and waving, etc. Some people just ignoring the camera. But when the camera pointed at Jeremy, instead of just smiling and waving, Fry got up, started lip-syncing the song, dancing, air guitaring, running around the stadium and engaging with the crowd, trying to get everybody amped up, trying to turn it into like a live music video, essentially. Now, Riggle says when you watch this video, and a lot of commentators on YouTube said the same thing, like, we think that he's being awesome, at least in this moment. You might even wish that you were there, wish that you could participate in this awesome moment that he's created. But now he also points to another person in the video, who I'm going to call the buzzkill. So some in the audience joined in with Jeremy, participated with this activity. Some in the audience just ignored him, just kept going about their lives. But one fan, person I'm going to call the buzzkill, actually positively rejected the moment by pushing Jeremy away and pretending to kick him as he goes off. Now, Riggle says, and many YouTube commentators yet again claim that this fan in the crowd just totally sucks. The buzzkill sucking is the opposite of Fry's awesomeness here. So we have awesome on one end of the spectrum, and we have sucks on the other. Now, we've discussed a lot of views that try to illuminate the good life by appealing to different ideas, different kinds of experiences, etc. There's hedonism, which appeals merely to the experience of pleasure or enjoyment. There's Aristotle, who appeals to the idea of living a virtuous life, which might result in pleasure, but pleasure is not the point. The ideal is virtue and exercising that virtue. And Susan Wolf, she doesn't think this is the only part of a good life, but she tries to give an account of a meaningful life and proposes that meaning in our lives, in the sense she describes, is something that we desire and want to have, as at least an ideal good life would include that, according to her. Riggle does agree that we want these kinds of things in our lives. We want enjoyment, we want pleasure, we want to exercise virtue. He doesn't specifically talk about meaning, but he says that these kinds of ideals don't readily stoke our contemporary ethical imagination. They seem maybe dry and boring. They don't get us excited. Now, Riggle suggests that this notion of being awesome and captures our imagination better. We want to be an awesome person. We worry about being that dude that sucks, like the buzzkill fan. So this threat of being a sucky person seems distinctive. It's not the same thing as being worried about being an immoral or vicious person. You can be a buzzkill without being a vicious person. And the promise of being awesome seems to resonate, at least with the U.S. imagination, in a way that goodness, virtue, politeness, dutifulness, and other traditional forms of moral excellence don't. And again, you might be a good person, a virtuous person, polite person, a moral person, but still be missing that awesomeness that we desire. So it's important here to note that Riggle's not arguing that pleasure, virtue, or meaning are not important aspects of good life. They can be important, So instead, he's not arguing that those things are not good for us. Rather, he's saying that being awesome is also something that seems to be intrinsically valuable and thereby something we also ought to strive for in our own lives. We shouldn't just strive to be a good person or have a meaningful life. We should strive to be awesome. But now, there's a worry here because you might say, well, what do you mean we should strive to be awesome? Now, you might worry that the word awesomeness and sucks are just too general to really give us any kind of substantive ideal. It's just empty. It's so vague that it doesn't give us any concrete goal to shoot for in our lives. So here, Riggle brings up this kind of worry. The usage of these words is so broad that they're nearly empty, meaning little more than good or bad. So it seems like when you say be awesome, you're just saying, look, be a good person, like live a good life. But that's not very informative. I mean, just consider the range of things that can be awesome or sucky. A game can be awesome or sucky. A social media app, a friend's behavior, the restaurant down the street, the concert last night, you. Everything is awesome, as we know from a recent Lego movie. And apparently nearly anything can suck. But the idea is if we can describe anything as being awesome just to mean like it's a good version of that thing, and we can describe anything as sucking and just mean, well, it's a bad game or a bad social media app or a bad restaurant. If those ideas are just so general, they're not helpful for informing us about the kind of life we might want to live. We can respond to this, though, by noting that just because we can use it in that general way doesn't mean we can't use it in other, more specific ways. Just because we use awesome and sucks in this general way doesn't mean that when we look closely at some examples and how these terms are used, we might sometimes use it for a more specific and special idea that would explain why being awesome would do a better job at capturing our imagination, at providing us with this kind of ideal that could be informative, could give us a more substantive goal to shoot for living our lives well. Riggle does think that there is this more special, specific idea that we sometimes try to pick out with the word awesome. He describes this special idea in a few different ways. He says, awesomeness concerns the art of creating social openings. Well, what does he mean by a social opening, though? Well, a social opening gives us an opportunity to step outside of our norms, habits, and routines by giving us an opportunity to express our individuality. You open the door to a mutual appreciation of an aspect of your and others' individuality. So, awesomeness involves creating these opportunities to step outside of going through the motions, of the normal roles of everyday life, and do something special where we express how we are different, how we are individuals, and also allow others to express their individuality, and we can engage in a mutual appreciation of who we are as individuals. So, awesomeness is a distinctive phenomenon wherein someone expresses themselves in the spirit of fostering mutual appreciative regard. From creating a social opening at a cafe, to enlivening the community or workplace, throwing a great party, or getting a whole section of a stadium to play around. Notice there's both a stress on a kind of breaking of the norms, expressing individuality, but also there's a social aspect to engaging with others and appreciating their individuality and helping them to step outside the norm as well. So it's both stressing these individual aspects of ourselves and also stressing the way in which we socially engage with others. I think that's a pretty interesting thing to note here. So putting all that together, in a Scientific American article, Riggle describes it as following, that being awesome is being good at creating social openings, or moments of mutual appreciation between people when they break out of their norms and routines by expressing their individuality in a way that gets others to express theirs as well. Let's consider some examples of people being awesome, even like small, big. It doesn't always have to be a huge stadium engagement like we saw in the video of Jeremy Fry. So, yes, Jeremy Fry in the stadium does seem to express this kind of awesomeness by engaging in this activity It's breaking out of the routine. Like usually a fan, like when the Jumbotron, like the norm, the routine is to look up and point and say, hi, da-da-da. But given the camera on him, Stephen Fry created this new opportunity to break these norms, to do something new and exciting and out of the ordinary and express who he is as a person. Moreover, he invited others to join in, try to get the rest of the crowd, so created this opening where others were able to express their individuality as well. So we see all those aspects. That social opening was created by Jeremy Fry, and other people then participated in that social opening. Now, Riggle also gives a cafe example, where he says, look, it might be the case that you go to a cafe and you order coffee, and usually the barista might just be like, what can I get for you? And you say, I don't know, you order a mocha, whatever. And then they're just like, okay, that'll be $4.55. You give the money and say thanks, bye. There's this like standard script that we go by. What would you like? I'd like this. That'll be this so much money. Here you go. Thanks. Have a good day. It's routine. It's a norm. It's just these social roles that we fall into. We can just go through the motions. But he says, imagine the customer who goes in there, and then as they are like going through this script, the customer makes a joke, expresses who they are as an individual. And then the barista then has an opportunity to respond in a way that maybe laughs at the joke or adds on to it. It creates this social opening where they can both express their individuality and break free of that routine, of that script of just going through the motions of buying coffee. It's small and it's brief, but it is an example of this kind of awesomeness that Riggle's describing. Now, he also mentions Glenn Burke and the invention of the high five. Glenn Burke is a baseball player who is credited with being the first person to do the high five. And the idea was this was a way of appreciating a moment with one's teammates. And this was a way to do that in a new way, break the norms by going through this activity and appreciate this moment together. Note, Riggle believes that this idea of displays of awesomeness are very different than just displays of excellence. So he gives a comparison. Look, some musical artists might give excellent live performances where they're very good at their instruments and they're very good musicians and they play everything perfectly when you're there. So it all sounds like amazing and the technical skill presented is phenomenal. But there might be something missing. That like an excellent performance is very different than a musical artist giving an awesome live performance. When you imagine an awesome live performance, you imagine ways in which the musical artist doesn't just perform their music technically very skilled, but they create an environment where the artist and the fans can engage with one another. They create these social openings where they can express their individuality. The artist gets the crowd to join in singing or gets them to join in some kind of dance or whatever it might be. Something that's out of the ordinary and special about this individual performance. All right. So in this sense, awesome is definitely distinct from. It's not just using this very general good and bad way. When you say there's an awesome restaurant down the corner, usually you don't mean it in the sense of creating social openings in the sense that Riggle is using here. So he's given more substance to this idea of being awesome. So what would it mean to place this kind of idea as an ideal in our lives, as a goal of how we want to live? Well, he explains the ethics of awesomeness would concern the actions, habits, character traits, values, and principles, in short, the ways of life that make us awesome and not sucky. So an ethics of awesomeness would be thinking about the things we can do, the habits we can get into, determining what ways are best for developing this kind of awesomeness and avoiding being sucky. Now, he says the creative community builder stands at the pinnacle of the ethics of awesomeness, forming its highest ideal. So you can think of this as being like the exemplar, the example that you want to try to live up to. The ethics of awesomeness concerns ways of being such a person and ways of responding or failing to respond to them. The ideally awesome person is, in short, a virtuoso, very skilled with communal imagination, imagining culture and community where it doesn't exist and bringing it to life. There's that social openings, bringing that community into existence where it wasn't there before. Like Jeremy Fry. There wasn't this community amongst the fans. By engaging in this act, he created this opening that created community amongst the fans that wasn't there before he did this. And so a couple questions for y'all to consider. So what are your own examples of people being awesome in Riggle's sense of this term? And what ways of life, as Riggle says, do you think would help people become more awesome in their lives, or even yourself? And what kind of connections can you draw between Riggle's ethics of awesomeness and some of the other ideas about the good life we've encountered? At least one connection I want to draw is actually a difference. I think Riggle's account of awesomeness here actually places a higher emphasis on the ways in which our lives are constituted by our relationships to others. There's a much bigger focus on the social aspects of our lives for understanding what it is for us to live a good life. All right, so think about other connections, similarities, differences that you could notice between these different ideals. All right, I'll see y'all next time. Bye-bye.